Okay, Year 10s, welcome to this podcast on classification. Quite tricky in that there's lots of new keywords that you need to learn, and you need to know orders of things as well. So it is a bit of a pain in the backside. However, you are required to know it, so let's crack on and stop whinging about it. So, Animal Kingdom. The Animal Kingdom. Obviously, there's lots of animals, there are lots of species of animals in the Animal Kingdom. So there has to be a way of ordering it so we can recognise animal from animal. And the first thing we're going to touch upon is how that is ordered. The first thing you've got the kingdom. And there's 4 different kingdoms: animal, plant, protista, fungi. So the kingdom, which kingdom is it in? Then you've got the phylum. Then you've got its class, and all the time as you go down these categories, you're narrowing down to a single species. And then you've got the order, then you've got the family, then the genus, and finally the individual species. So for instance, here you'll have, or you could have all the cats in genus, but the species will be a lion or a leopard or a cheetah. So you narrow it down from all the animals in the kingdom down to a lion or a cheetah. But as you go up, they'll all have things in common, and less as you go up the group. The way to remember this, very unlikely you'll get many questions on this. Keep ponds clean, or frogs get sick. Keep frogs clean, or frogs get sick. You might also remember the song as well. I'm not going to sing the song because I can't sing, as you know, but whichever way you remember it. Okay, so next we talked about these kingdoms in before. Let's have a look at these kingdoms and see what similarities there are and what differences are between each of the kingdoms. The first one, Animalia, which is basically animals, posh name for animals. So what makes an animal an animal? Well, first thing we can say, it is multicellular. Lots of cells, basically. Those cells have no cell walls. There's no chlorophyll present. And lastly, they are heterotrophs. So they eat other things, whether it be animals or plants, to get their energy. And that is the animal kingdom. Next is the plantae, which, you guessed it, is, to you and me, plants. What makes a plant a plant? Well, it does also have lots of cells. It's multicellular. Similarity straight away, you see. So as you go through this, you're thinking, oh, it's the same as plants. Oh, yeah. Because a common question is similarities and differences between the two. They do have cell walls. They do have chlorophyll. And this time they are autotrophs. Auto means on its own. So it can make its own food. It can make its own energy, basically. Very clever. Next, fungi. They are also multicellular. They have cell walls. Like us, they have no chlorophyll. And these are saprophytics. Let me spell this right now. Saprophytes. And that means digests the food outside of the body. It's fungi. Right, Protista. I'm struggling with spelling today, I apologise. Protista. They are unicellular, one cell. And they have nucleus. And the last one, as I said before, I do apologise, it's 5, are the prokaryotes. And that is your bacteria of this world. The five kingdoms. Prokaryotes, the last one. They're also unicellular. And they have no nucleus this time. And they are the common characteristics. The main thing for you, this is basically the common question. Give one thing or a couple of things that plant-side kingdom has that the animal kingdom has. You have to choose from the list. So now let's go over. We're continuing on classification. Before we leave classification, it is worth saying we've got viruses. Why have they not got their own little category? Well, because they need other cells to survive, so they use other cells. And also, they have not all the life processes. So you remember in year 7 we did Mrs. Gran. Virus don't tick all those boxes. That's why we're saying they're not living in their own right. Okay, so out of all this kingdom, out of all the animals, we can narrow it down further and we can talk about the vertebrates. And I'm going to draw a table for this. So if you say vertebrates, and vertebrates means with backbone. So all the animals that have backbones, we can break them up into groups. Again, you probably know the groups from primary school, but what's very much secondary school and what's very much GCSE is knowing why they are what they are. So first up, mammals. So a monkey, a tiger, a lion, a rat. Okay, they all have things in common. Those things, and we're going to comment on this on all of them. Reproduction, fertilization, I'm trying to draw a table, I'm trying to get it fit. Oxygen and thermoregulation. Thermoregulation, remember, how do they control their temperature? So, mammals. What can we say about all those things? Like I said, it's going to get quite messy. And there is overlap between the vertebrates. So, first of all, mammals. Viviporous. Give birth to live young. How do they fertilize? Internally. Sperm meets egg inside the organism. Oxygen. How do they get their oxygen? They use lungs. And lastly, the second complicated word, should I say, thermoregulation. They are homeotherms. They control their own temperatures. Next, fishes. Shark, pollock, tuna, the list goes on. They are oviporous. That means eggs. They lay eggs. Eggs lay. Wrong way around, but I'll continue. Fertilization is outside of the body. It's external. How do they get oxygen? Using gills. Temperature, they are poikiliotherms. So they rely on their environment. So that's why if you go to the fish shop and you say, oh, I like that fish, it looks like Nemo, then you can't just whack them in cold water, they will die. Because they're used to warm water to survive. So they rely on their environment for temperature regulation. Okay, next one. Birds. They lay eggs, of course. So I'm just going to shorten this down now. Ovi. Internal for fertilization. Lungs for breathing. And they are homeotherms. They control their own temperature. you can see there's overlap, so us and the mammals are the same, but we're different in other ways. So you see there's overlap, and again it's a very common question. How are mammals and birds, what do they do differently, or how do they control temperature differently, or similarly, as the case may be. Reptiles, they are ovi, lay eggs. Their fertilisation is internal. Lungs and puiks. So that's why you'll see snakes just being very, very still at the beginning of the day, warming up to get warm, ready for the day's hunting or whatever they decide to do on that day. Shopping maybe. Amphibians. They are laying eggs. External fertilisation. A frog will lay eggs to be fertilised. They have lungs, except for their young who have gills, so we can put that gills for young. So a tadpole, for instance, starts life in the water, so it has gills, but then very quickly they develop into lungs as it gets old and lives on the land, mostly. But they can't control their temperature, and that is poikilotherms. So there is your table of vertebrates, people. Very complicated as you may think, and I suppose it is to some extent. The way to revise this is cover bits up and say, right, let's do mammals first, reproduction, and just keep doing it until you get it right and you know it, until you know that table. Last thing I want to mention on classification before I disappear and you have a go at the exam questions is a couple of terms. Species is when two animals can mate and produce fertile offspring because they are closely enough related to each other and share similar characteristics. However, species that are closely related can also breed, such as a lion and a tiger. They're not the same species, but they could breed. Not naturally, of course, because they live on two different continents. But they would produce something called a hybrid, a mixture of two species. And usually, only usually, their offspring is sterile, infertile. So they can't go on to reproduce. Stops with them. And lastly, binominal means that all species have two names. Bi means two, nominal means names. And that is a genus and the species. So you've got Panthera leo, and that is a lion. But the same genus, so Panthera, will also be the start for a leopard. I don't know what the second bit is for leopard, the actual species name is for leopard. But it will also be the same. See? So it gives you two names, again, so you can identify between the two. And that is classification. A lot of information, a lot of new words there, autotrophs, heterotrophs, etc. Mostly, though, the skill on this page is knowing differences, similarities and differences. And you'll be able to access most questions if you can grasp that. Okay, I've got the questions now, and I'll show you what the answers look like.